Hey there. This week we are going to be doing a little chat about building Chrome extensions without code, particularly using Bubble. And I've got a very special guest here who knows a huge amount about that, which is Alex Cooney from Cranford Tech. So, hey, Alex.
Thanks for having me, James. Glad to be here.
Really exciting to have you here because I know this is a topic that maybe a lot of people don't really realize exactly how much is possible and just what you can do with Chrome extensions now without actually having to write them by hand. Because I know, like for years and years, I've always wanted to make extensions for different things, and I was just, oh, I wish I could do that. But then I kind of read a bit about doing it with Bubble and how possible it was, and I saw a couple of examples. So it really is possible to build stuff now, isn't it? I like, and also some examples. It would be great to hear about of different apps that you've seen that have been built.
Sure. So, yeah, Chrome extensions, it's a massive kind of area. So, the Chrome Web Store gets about 37 million visitors per month from organic traffic alone. But you're right, there's not really many kind of specific kind of guides out there on how to build a Chrome extension using Bubble. And to be honest, there is a bit of code involved, which seems to put a lot of people off. But the good news is, using certain tools, you can pretty much abstract that away and just focus on the Bubble part and the stuff that Bubble developers are skilled at. So how I came into the space myself was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with a guy called Damien Yanzi. Damien was quite active in the Bubble community for a long period between maybe 2020 and just the last year. He decided to move on to other ventures, and one of the fantastic tools he had built was a Bubble Chrome extension builder called Charles. So Damien was looking to kind of move on to other things. He knew that I was in the kind of business of taking over plugins, and he asked if I'd be interested in doing so. So I was delighted to take over Charles, which is this tool that lets you build Chrome extensions using Bubble last year. And I've just been amazed, even in the short time that I've been kind of responsible for managing the plugin, just to see the different things that people can build with it and just what's possible using kind of, no code technologies like Bubble to build Chrome extensions that can really be useful for, personal use cases, for businesses, and for all other sorts of things as well.
Yeah, and I've used Charles on a couple of apps, and it's really cool what you can do with it. You can make all sorts of different kind of Chrome extensions. I guess it would be interesting to talk a little bit about how you actually go about setting up an app with, or how to actually get started with even making a Chrome extension, because while your app is, or Charles is on the Bubble plugin store, there is a little bit more to it than that as well, isn't there? So that might be good just to talk, like, explain a little bit like where you get started right at the beginning. So maybe you have a Bubble app that doesn't have any kind of Chrome functionality at all. How would you kind of go about starting to build that?
It's really easy. So putting Chrome extensions together, there's a bit of complexity. Chrome extensions require kind of very specific configurations. They're typically kind of, you're using a manifest file is what it's called to instruct, Chrome what specific task the extension is going to do. But Charles kind of abstracts all that away. So the way you would build a Chrome extension using Bubble at the moment is you download the Charles source code, you would open it up in a code editor, and then you would change just one line of code, which basically directs it to your Bubble app. And what that allows you to do is, if you have your Bubble app, just like you've built any other Bubble app, you can simply display that Bubble app in a pop-up, in a sidebar modal, in a floating modal, and it essentially then allows you to use all the standard Bubble functionality just within a Chrome extension. So it's literally just changing one line of code. You then have your Bubble app within a Chrome extension. And then beyond that, I guess you can install the Charles plugin if you choose to do so. And what that gives you is a lot of kind of native Chrome extension functionality out of the box. So things like, if you wanted to get access to the content on a web page, so let's say you're on, some sort of Substack newsletter, and you want to open up your Chrome extension and somehow get access to the content that's on the Substack page, you can use some of the native actions that come with Charles to effectively communicate between the Bubble app that's been displayed in the Chrome extension and the content on the page. And one of the really interesting ways I've seen people use this is to integrate Chrome extensions with AI. So there's a million Bubble apps being built with, be it ChatGPT or Claude or some other LLM at the moment. But what's really interesting about combining that with Chrome extensions is you can take data or content from a website that isn't your own, pass it through to your Chrome extension, and then use your LLM to change that content to use it in some other way. So, at a very basic level, it might be something like, I'm on this article, it's 2,000 words long, please give me a 5-line summary. You can click a button in your Bubble app. Charles will then take the content from that web page and it'll give you a summary back that you can save them to your Bubble database. So I suppose the possibilities are kind of endless when you're using these LLMs, but that's just like a very simple example of how you do it. And there's plenty of other functionality you can do as well. You can display native Chrome alerts. You can take screenshots. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility in what kind of Bubble app you want to build.
That's awesome. So I guess at a very high level, what it's doing is kind of rendering your Bubble app in kind of an iframe, I suppose, in the Chrome extension. But to all intents and purposes, it feels like a real Chrome app. And I've used a few of these Bubble extensions, and they don't feel any different to any other Chrome extension. So you can make them feel really, really native. And like you kind of touched on there is a ton of additional functionality you can access, like getting the URL that the user is currently on, text off the page they're on, like you said, screenshots, and I think I even saw that you can kind of make edits to web page content itself if you want to. So what might some use cases for that be? Because I've seen, that's quite a popular thing that Chrome extensions do, isn't it? Is maybe, on certain sites it can change things. That's quite an interesting use case as well.
It is. It's one of those use cases that you could use a million different ways. I guess for a very specific example that you and me might both be familiar with, if you wanted to make a change to the Bubble editor in some form, you could theoretically, grab an element off the page, make a change to it, be that either change the text that's being displayed or change the kind of formatting of how things are laid out in your editor. You may have seen there's been a few Chrome extensions that I don't think have been made with Charles specifically, but there have been a few Bubble related Chrome extensions released recently that basically allow people to build their own UI improvements to the Bubble editor. So I suppose that's a very kind of close to home example of how you might do it, but you can really kind of modify content on any page. And somewhat related to that, something that I've definitely seen people ask quite a bit about is web scraping. So again, rather maybe modifying the content on the page, a lot of people are interested in using a Chrome extension to extract data from a page, put it into their Bubble database, and use it for a purpose later on. And that's one of those use cases where you can use Charles for a bit of that out of the box. But what I really like about the way the plugin is built, and all credit to Damien on this, not me certainly, but one of the things I like about how we structured it in the early days was it allows you to inject your own JavaScript into web pages, which means that if you're willing to get down and use a small bit of code, be it AI generated or your own custom code, you can really push the boundaries of what you can do with it, because you can really scrape as much data in whatever structure you want, or render the use case as well. So it's just kind of a nice bit of extra flexibility where you're not necessarily limited just by what comes with the plugin. Rather, you can use your own code to extend it in any way you like.
So it's super flexible. Then you can do pretty much anything you can imagine by the sounds of it, especially if you get into using AI generated code as well. I guess one other kind of big benefit to making a Chrome extension for any app, or particularly for a Bubble app, I guess, is that you get exposure to the Chrome Web Store as well. And it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about how that works. So maybe once you've built your Bubble powered Chrome extension and you've tested it locally, you can then kind of put it out to the world in the kind of the Chrome store, can't you? And it's a fairly simple process, I think, as well, isn't it?
It is. There are certain things you need to declare to Chrome when you're submitting your Chrome extension for submission. And I have had users who forget a permission, or maybe the description doesn't quite accurately reflect what the Chrome extension does, and you will get dinged. Chrome will ask you to resubmit it. But speaking as someone who's submitted plugins to the Bubble plugin marketplace, it's actually quite a similar process. You lay out exactly what your Chrome extension is doing. You tell Chrome what permissions specifically you are going to be requiring. So are you going to require access from the current tab? Are you going to be require access to another tab? Stuff like that, just because Chrome, I believe, have become very not cautious, but they definitely clamped down a bit on some Chrome extensions who were probably harvesting too much data a
Yeah.
couple of years ago. So, which from a user point of view is great. I have a bit more confidence in the Chrome extensions I'm installing now versus call it 2 or 3 years ago. But it just means when you're submitting it, you need to be extra explicit about exactly what your Chrome extension does. But the good news is it's pretty straightforward. Charles has a bunch of documentation on how to do this. There's other guides out there as well. And once you do get your Chrome extension listed, you're really in front of a massive audience. Like I said, tens of millions of people visiting the Chrome store every month. So it's a great way to get distribution for, or at least awareness of your app. If you're building a kind of more traditional, even B2B SaaS, well, having a Chrome extension out there, it's just another way of getting visibility and getting people aware of your product.
Yeah, I've read about some really good cases of people, getting tons of traffic through the Chrome Web Store, and particularly things like just getting a do follow link and things like that you get from having an app on the Chrome Web Store. It's definitely worth it. So yeah, and I think like we've kind of touched on, this is a really, really good time to think about building Chrome extensions. I think particularly for those AI use cases where maybe you want to do something like grabbing the content of a page, summarizing it with AI and turning it into a tweet or something like that. And obviously that's really quite straightforward to do with Bubble. It's not too complicated at all. So yeah, very, very exciting time. And I wonder if there's any particular Chrome extensions that you've seen that do interesting things that kind of spring to mind. Any particular use cases you've seen people using Charles for, or just Chrome extensions in general? Because yeah, there's just so much you can do, isn't there?
Yeah, and I'll maybe give a shout out to 2 or 3 specifically that I've seen with Charles. So one of my favorite ones is, you may or may not be familiar with Basis UI, this kind of UI kit put together that allows you to take these, beautifully designed Bubble components and then add them to your own editor, essentially saving you a bunch of time instead of creating your own elements from scratch every time. And component libraries and Bubble component libraries specifically are one of the things you can do with Charles. And I just think the Basic guys have done a fantastic job of putting that one together. Some of the other ones more in the kind of summarization field are Better Legal, a well-known kind of Bubble app. They've put together a Chrome extension that essentially allows you to summarize complex legal documents using AI, which is, I think, such a kind of, use case where you're saving so much time just by having this one extension. And again, it's something you could easily do in a web app as well, but just by having this summarization feature living in the Chrome extension, I guess it means that it follows you throughout wherever you're navigating on the web and just makes it that much easier to use rather than copying and pasting into a web app. You have the extension there and good to go. And then maybe one more is kind of one specific example around kind of audio summarization, where people can record kind of, voice notes and get kind of a clean, crisp summary back. That's something I've seen from a couple of users as well. So big range of use cases that kind of only scratches the surface. But yeah, the flexibility is just something that really kind of plays the advantage of Chrome extensions for sure.
Yeah, I think those are some great examples, and yeah, I'm a big fan of Basis as well. We've covered that a bit before and how great that is, and that's amazing to think that that's all powered by Charles through a Chrome extension. That's very, very cool indeed. So I guess it would be interesting also to touch a little bit on the Bubble plugin kind of ecosystem, because that's something you're also involved with. So obviously Charles is a plugin for Bubble, but I know you've also got a ton of other kind of popular plugins. I've used a few myself. For example, the Stripe Managed Checkout is the one that I use, which is really, really nice. So it'd be great to get your kind of thoughts on like the current state of the Bubble plugin ecosystem, how it's maturing, and just what it's like building apps for Bubble, because I know a lot of people are interested in building, even like I do, your own custom bits and pieces for Bubble, and just what your experience has been like building for the platform.
Yeah, so I started building plugins on Bubble in mid 2022. And the one thing I'm always conscious of when I'm building plugins today is I'm just so jealous of people that are starting building plugins today, because it's just so much easier. Because number one, there's actually much more materials out there on how exactly to build plugins. And the Bubble plugin infrastructure has some kind of unique quirks where even if you're, a highly skilled traditional, programmer, That doesn't necessarily mean you can start building plugins straight away, but thankfully there's some pretty good materials out there on how to do it these days. And then secondly, I guess AI makes building plugins quite a bit easier. Definitely not all the work, but it can definitely speed up the process if you're able to use some sort of AI assistant when you're building plugins. So yeah, even in the kind of 2.5 years that I've been pretty active in the space, it's just matured both in terms of the tooling available and also the materials out there. And I guess it's kind of interesting, like, I don't think people are fully aware just how core plugins are to kind of, powering Bubble as a whole. I've done a kind of small mini research project myself, just trying to figure out how many plugins does the average production Bubble app use. And I've come up with a figure of somewhere between kind of 15 to 18 plugins on average. I've actually seen an app that uses over 200 plugins. And while I wouldn't necessarily recommend you use over 200 plugins, it does go to show, I guess, just how kind of powerful plugins are in serving Bubble apps more generally. But yeah, the space is definitely, I would say, professionalized over the past couple of years. When I started building, even the paid plugins, there were certainly a lot of plugins out there that wouldn't necessarily have the best documentation. There may not be exactly the best demo apps. You may be able to get in touch with the creator behind the plugin if you had a problem, but you may also not. But I think there's definitely more people coming to the space now who are driving that more professionalization of it, and you're starting to see more detailed documentation, more confidence in the plugins, specifically for a kind of smaller number of people who are pretty serious about building them. So yeah, I think they're going to continue to be a core part of Bubble apps going forward. So hopefully the space kind of continues to grow with it.
Yeah, you touch on a few things there. I think, quality documentation for Bubble apps or for plugins is just so important. And it often is the deciding factor when I look at a plugin of whether I'll use it or not is that documentation. And the good news, like you say, is I think more and more apps are professionalizing, and, we're getting really good documentation, and it's a lot easier to access. So that's really good to see. And also, like you said, the tooling itself. I know one tool that I've read a bit about is Bask. I had a bit of a play with it, but I think I'm kind of interested to learn more about that. But it was a little technical for me getting started. But yeah, there are. Have you had any experience with using tools like Bask as well to
I
generate
have.
Bubble plugins?
I'm a daily user of Bask, and you're right, it is a bit technical to get set up initially. I will say Andrew, who is the creator behind Bask, he is very good on the support and will help you out. And once you get it up and running, it's been a game changer for me, just in terms of the speed that you can ship with, because I guess functionally it's not that different from any other kind of code editor, but just compared to the standard Bubble plugin environment, it's just a delight to use. And then you also get the AI assistant built into it as well, which is a massive plus. So yeah, it is definitely maybe a bit of a technical hurdle to get over initially, but I'd encourage you to try and get over the hump and get up and running with it.
That's it, and it's just great to see tools, professional tools like that coming out for the Bubble developer ecosystem. It's just great that we've got that kind of thing coming through. So, if you were going to give like a recommendation of someone, to someone who was thinking about starting to try building their own custom plugin for their own app, where would you say to start looking for information on just building something fairly simple to get started with?
There's some good, videos out there. There's some good guides, but I genuinely think the best way to learn how to build a plugin is look at some of the open source plugins that are currently available, and then either modify one for your own uses or just figure out how they work. I think it's such an underrated learning resource to look at all the open source plugins, where you can literally see every line of code that's been written, every way it's been configured. And that's how I learned back when I started a couple of years ago. I didn't have a clue, to be honest. I had done a bit of coding before, but certainly not anything like was required for a plugin. And yeah, I kind of looked at one that was already out there, figured how to change it a small bit more, and then suddenly you start building your own from scratch using the knowledge that you've built up from that. So that would probably be my number one recommendation. Find a plugin you like, but maybe you think could be changed a bit. Find an open source version of it, and then make your own changes.
I think that's really good advice, because I think a lot of people don't realize that you can view the source code of so many plugins, and maybe they don't know where you actually find it. So where do you actually look to find that open? If there is an open source version of a plugin, and how do you look at the code for it?
So what you want to do is you want to go to the plugins tab of your Bubble editor, filter by free plugins, because all premium plugins, they will not be open source. You will not be able to view the code. And if you go onto the plugin page, there will be a button that says see plugin code essentially. And for, I would say, maybe 80% of those plugins, the code is going to be legible in that you can see exactly what the code, does. For some of them, they're using a kind of technique called obfuscation, where they're kind of hiding the code so people can't copy it, which is kind of a different discussion. But yeah, that's how you'd find one. Look for free plugins, look for ones where the plugin code is readily available, and go from there.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to start and super easy to find. And it does give you a real feel for how plugins are put together in Bubble. So, yeah, I think that's a really good overview of two really exciting kind of areas in the whole no-code ecosystem, with like Chrome extensions and then actually building plugins for Bubble itself. So if anyone wants to get started with any of that or find out about you or more of your plugins, where can they go and find more?
They can go to cranfordtech.com, or they can simply search for Cranford Tech on the Bubble forum. I'm usually pretty active there, so feel free to send me a message.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Alex, for taking the time out to give us that kind of quick overview of Chrome extensions with no code, and also the Bubble plugin ecosystem. I think that was really interesting. And we may see you at the Create With conference as well in May. So hopefully look forward to seeing you there as well, where we're going to touch on some of these topics as well in more depth. So great.
Looking
Thanks
forward
very
to the
much
conference,
for...
James.
Yeah, great. Look forward to seeing you there. Well, thanks very much for taking the time today, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, James.